This is a custom M4A4 skin seen in CS2, and this is the default M4A4 skin in CS2. Do you see the difference? Stop laughing, this is deadly serious. And after this video you may never see your skins you spent so much of your hard-earned money on ever again. In the same way, ever again. You'll still have them, but the differences here extend far beyond the skin pattern and even the materials themselves. And these changes don't just apply to your M4s. You have been warned. But first, your life might never be the same again after this video's sponsor, ExpressVPN, which works like this. Click a location and all of your internet traffic will go through that location, helping bypass censorship to help keep you anonymous online and enabling you to access more of the content from services and channels that you're subscribed to. For example, while in England, you won't be able to watch the British show Sherlock on Netflix, and yet the French can, like so. That's not very bon, but at least now I can prove to people that Sherlock knew that guy was a boomerang user and thus caused the whole supposed mystery about that case not to make sense anymore. That's a weight off my mind. Companies want to know everything about you, including what you're browsing. But if you don't want the whole world to know that you've got Ring 1, then firstly, don't say it in a sponsored segment of a YouTube video, and secondly, use ExpressVPN when searching your ailments, which in conjunction with incognito and general browsing common sense will help to mitigate many of the ways that companies currently use to track you. This can be especially challenging when away from home. I travel to events, often abroad, where I have to rely on public Wi-Fi of questionable quality, and using a VPN helps to protect my information via end-to-end encryption. This came in handy just the other week when I found myself lost in Serbia. ExpressVPN has just had their strict no-logs policy audited by KPMG for the third time, where they concluded that ExpressVPN's trusted server architecture and privacy controls functioned as designed and identified no issues with their safeguards towards activity logging. ExpressVPN has seen many improvements recently, like to now have servers in every one of America's 50 states. ExpressVPN's Android and iOS apps have recently been redesigned to be faster, smarter and more user-friendly, and most crucially, now support dark mode so you won't get blinded when using the app in the middle of the night. There are a range of plans to choose from, starting from 12 cents a day for the basic package, which still supports up to 10 simultaneous connections. But move up the packages and you gain even more features like advanced protection, a password manager, and even several days of unlimited eSIM data from their advanced and pro packages. Find out how you can get up to 4 extra months by clicking the link in the description below to go to expressvpn.com/3clicksfiller. And it helps me too, so thanks. Counter-Strike has always been built around the gun models. The story started even before this game, back in 1997 when Min Lee, aka the Gooseman, picked up the recently released SDK for Quake and started modelling the M16. It took him 2 months of painstaking effort, but he eventually produced this. And it was slated on the internet forums at the time, causing him to nearly give up on the project entirely. But he didn't. He persisted for the love of it, crafting more weapons as he went, and soon the idea for a Navy SEALs mod was born, a serious shooter in amongst the Quakes of the time. The mod was well received, although players were confused by the name of the mod. They felt very powerful as though they were playing a T-1000 from Terminator, and they suggested the mod should have been called Terminator Quake instead. Min then started working on a sequel, which soon became too ambitious, and he donated all his weapon models and animations to the A-Team, who were developing AQtion Quake 2 at the time. And this is an interesting one. It's available on Steam under the name AQtion, if you'd like to give it a go today. It's playable online, but also has bot support, so it will live forever, just as nature intended. Though, in the online game I played of it, I had that sneaking suspicion that online servers were already inhabited by bots, because even I could beat them. Yet another thing this game has in common with Counter-Strike, am I right? It's very strange to play. The weapon models look distinctly Counter-Strike, but the movement is jarring, rubber bandy, because it's all based on Quake 2, which I was reminded of when I got shot and was yeeted across the level. But it was great fun, with a sort of intuitive simplicity to it that you just don't get from today's invested, grindy kinds of shooters. Yet it was still vastly different from all the sci-fi games that were out at the time. AQtion Quake 2 sported not just realistic looking locations and characters, but also weapons. And also a bunch of quite advanced gameplay features for the time. Fall too far and you break a leg. You have to limp about the level in a very annoying manner. Get shot and you slowly bleed out. And having to heal in this game is even riskier than it is in deathmatch mode today. You could zoom in with the sniper rifle, add laser sights to your weapons, you could throw knives, and the guns themselves had locational damage, damage drop-off, and also varying amounts of inaccuracy. Especially this shotgun. This thing makes the ones in Counter-Strike feel like snipers. And perhaps most impressively, all of these guns had reloading animations, setting this game far apart from pretty much everything else from the era. it's easy to take for granted how groundbreaking this mod was. Just a few short years prior, gun models were typically just 2D sprites with primitive animations. Yet Action Quake 2 still came at an interesting time before many of the features that we take for granted today. Look closely and you can see the guns in this game have a strange, ripply look to them. A quirk from a time that you tend to see in PlayStation 1 era games, due to their approach to animations by vertex manipulation. Whereas with newer, spooky skeleton-based animation, you'd reposition things as though they're a doll with limbs and joints, with vertex manipulation you'd have to painstakingly instruct the animation where every polygon corner would be at every keyframe, all done at extremely low precision. This would all have been masked by the low resolutions used at the time, but returning to it now at 4K, wibbly wobbly, gun model be floppily, but also charming, and a product of its time. Being a fast-paced arena shooter, you might think that Quake 2 is an odd choice of game to choose to mod for if you want realistic weapon models and damage mechanics. But then, what choice was there? The most suitable games I can think of would have been Rainbow Six, released in 1998, a game that didn't even have a visible gun model until the PlayStation 1 version. There was also Delta Force 1, a game with voxel graphics that in my mind I still consider futuristic, but good gun animations it did not. So here was Action Quake 2, jumping into the fray with its comparatively detailed weapons and animations, and going toe-to-toe with all of the multiplayer, fast-paced arena shooters at the time, because that was the trend. A trend that would last until Counter-Strike rewrote the rules. Things were progressing so incredibly rapidly at this time. For instance, Half-Life 1 came out just a week after Action Quake 2 was first released. How annoying. But also, how convenient. Because unlike the zany environments, characters and weapons of Quake, Half-Life was instead grounded in realism, featuring detailed weapon models and animations. No wonder it proved a more appealing base from which to develop Counter-Strike from. The thing that really blows my mind was the inspiration behind this whole thing. I just assumed that every early Half-Life and Unreal Tournament mod was inspired by the Matrix in some way, yet Counter-Strike, and the mods before it, actually predate the Matrix, and probably got more inspiration from the John Woo movies from even earlier in the 90s, which would go on to inspire the Matrix as well. So with all that in place, time to compare weapon models through the ages. And this was it. The earliest M16A2 model for the Quake 1 Navy SEALs mod, complete with grenade launcher. The weapon model is still very impressive for the time, but even the colours of its texture are being limited by its era. And the reload animation exists, I guess. And this is the one time in this video that I'll be showing the M16, as later games used the M4 instead, which is slightly shorter in length. This was the M4 for Action Quake 2, already a marked step up in terms of detail and animation, but no grenade launcher now, which is definitely a step backwards. And now, finally, almost 8 minutes into this video, we get on to Beta 1 of Counter-Strike. And I'll have to immediately move on because I can't for the life of me figure out how to make money to buy a weapon in this game, but I can still view Beta 1's M4 in the model viewer. And here it is in all its glory, 1087 polygons, though bear in mind that some of the polygons come from the ARM models, which come as standard on any M4 purchased. As you can see here, there's an animation for a burst fire mode, making the Maverick part M4, part AUG, and part FAMAS. While I have all the individual elements, it's still nice to see in the wild, and thanks to this video by I Love the Vopo, we can see how this all played out in this very earliest version of the game. I was able to get a later version of it working, so here's how it looked and sounded in Beta 5. Alternate fire doesn't remove the suppressor, but instead activates its 2x zoom, which was probably quite handy when playing the game at a resolution of like 30 pixels. Compared with Beta 1, you can see its textures have been made a bit lighter, and the poly count has been slightly increased, probably due to the added suppressor on the end of it. The AK-47 model at the time had fewer polygons, in part because it was only rendering one side of it, yet the M4 could be viewed from any. Rendering both sides does make sense, as people in-game might want to swap between the left-handed model, which Min always did, should they want a more traditional right-handed model in their game instead. During the 6th beta, a solution was found. There were now 2 weapon models for every gun, depending on whether you used them left or right-handed. The AK-47 was still only rendered on one side, but the M4 continued to be rendered from both, for both view models. And this was the moment when the scoped M4 was swapped out for the one that we recognise and love so much today. Fun fact, when you equip the M4, your character pulls out this button thing here. This is a forward assist and is meant to be pressed in like you would a regular button. What it does, it pushes the bolt carrier forward and ensures that it's locked, whatever that means. But Min didn't know this. Back in the day there weren't many resources online and he was too lazy to go to the library, but from the action movies he'd watched, he saw them putting something out the side of the gun and he assumed it was this. So you'll notice this animation quirk even as late as in Counter-Strike Source. And the problems don't stop there either, because if I drop this weapon, you can see it's still using the old M4 model. Valve, please fix. I went looking for when this was fixed, but it turns out that even in the latest, current Steam version of CS 1.6, drop the M4 and it still has a scope. Valve, please fix. They don't even need to make anything, because when this weapon was dropped in Beta 1, it looked like this. So in other words, in the oldest betas, the dropped gun model was using the new version, in the middle betas they matched up okay, then in the newest versions of the game, the dropped gun model for some reason uses the old version of the gun. That's almost impressively wrong. But ignoring the dropped model version, analysing the equipped one from 1.6, although identical to the beta 6.5 version in poly count, it does have lighter colours, and the guy's arm is less veiny around the edges, so changes have been made. Condition 0 more than doubles the poly count of the M4, and that's despite rendering just one side of the gun. It has become like the AK from 1.6. This Condition 0 version of the M4 looks pretty much entirely different, yet still distinctly M4. Interesting that. And at long last, the dropped gun model looks like it's supposed to. Apart from how the suppressor always seems to be attached, even if it's been removed from the weapon before you drop it. Valve. The move to Counter-Strike Source didn't actually increase the detail as much as you might expect, but I guess I always saw Condition 0 as being like a maxed out version of the Gold Source engine, whereas Counter-Strike Source was more of an early preview of what Source would eventually become. But poly count has still increased, and interestingly, there are the same number of polygons whether you have the silencer equipped or not. You know why? Because when not in use, the silencer remains part of the model, but just off the side of the screen somewhere. Look, here he is attaching and detaching it. Understandably, the dropped versions of these guns have nowhere to hide, and so their poly count does vary depending on whether or not you have the silencer equipped when you drop it. Meaning that, in theory, dropping an M4 with the silencer equipped will slow everyone's PCs down slightly more, possibly being the difference between victory and defeat. But probably not. These dropped versions of the M4 now have half the number of polygons that the earliest beta versions of the weapon when equipped had, which still isn't very much, is it? You'd think they could have spared a bit more for the new Source engine. Now this gets to me because in Left 4 Dead, look at these gun models. Perfectly acceptable looking, I think you'll agree. But now we go over to the naughty corner, full of reused Counter-Strike Source skins. Ew! The AWP and Scout, I'd say just about get away with it, but the SG looks wrong. Wrong, like a toy gun of some sort. Now this has bothered me for decades. I've wanted to talk about it, but I've never found a good enough reason to dwell on it until now. But it's why I've always ignored this gun whenever I found it. Even when I'm low on ammo, even when I need another gun, I still act like this thing doesn't exist because this gun model is dead to me. I don't even ping it for my teammates to find because I can't bring myself to look at them holding this monstrosity. And don't even get me started on its reload animation. Sure, its reduced polygon budget might have saved a few frames a second here and there back in 2004, but now in the 2020s it's a shortcut that cuts me to the bone by looking noticeably worse than everything else from a game that already doesn't look great by today's standards. Ugh. I guess I could mod it. After creating and sticking with Counter-Strike for a while, it was during Counter-Strike Source's lifetime that Min finally left Valve and Counter-Strike behind. He's currently working on a new game called Alpha Response. Here you can see an accurate depiction of London as you run about fighting armed goons, dogs, suicide bombers, and rescuing hostage after hostage as waves of enemies pour into your position. It's intense. And here's the M4 model from that game, if you want to see how far his M4 animating skills have come since the beginning. He told me that he puts just as much love and care into the gun animations in this game, and he feels he's grown a lot and says that he's been inspired by games like Modern Warfare, which he considers to have some of the best weapon animations. See, your character is no longer pulling on that forward assist. But you know what? I think they should. Just for old time's sake. Returning to Counter-Strike for now, we say goodbye to Counter-Strike Source, and hello to Counter-Strike Source, but now in the form of CSGO. A large graphical leap up, real-time shadows on stuff, and, in my opinion, the largest change to the M4 that the game ever saw, because now we have multiple M4 rifles at the same time. We have the M4A1, which looks like this. We have the M4A1S, which looks like this. And we have the M1A1. Wait, no, that's Operation Flashpoint. Oh, and we also have the M4A4, which looks identical to the M4A1 because it's the same gun, just named differently in different places. And since I live in console commands, where it is referred to as the M4A1, I will occasionally slip up and call it that, even though you probably know it as the M4A4, which is how it's referred to in the game buy menu. Please fix. And my obsession with poly count continues to pay off, because released just 3 years after Left 4 Dead 2's SG debacle, this game saw a stratospheric increase in its polygon budget, going from 3,000-ish polygons a weapon to over 18,000, and with a nice shiny material to boot. Wow. And that's not all. Not to play favourites, but the M4A1S clearly was, because it has 24,000 polygons. That's enough to make for a very wibbly looking weapon. The reason the M4A1S has more polygons is probably just because the weapon itself is more complex in shape, but it did also come out a year after the game's release, and when you consider that most of the game's release day content was around for a while beforehand, I think that time gap probably explains why the M4A1S is all round just a more detailed looking design. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I'm overthinking things. You think it's just because this bit of the gun with all its bumps and ridges requires more polygons to look equally as good as the M4A4's simpler design does. But that doesn't explain what has happened with the dropped models, where the M4A4 has just 2,000 polygons, while the M4A1S has 7,500. That's not a small difference. That's like a whole console generation's worth of poly count increase right there. This dropped model is already more detailed than any M4 rifle seen in the previous Counter-Strike games, equipped or dropped. If you lived for as many weeks as this weapon has polygons, then you'd be 143. Yep, statistically you've probably only got about 3,000 weeks left of your life. What are you doing this week? I don't really feel like covering guns anymore, if I'm honest. But yeah, this whole video has been a bit of a detour, because I only really started investigating to answer one simple question that I had. Over CSGO's lifetime, it's had thousands of custom skins made for it. Beautiful, custom designs, painstakingly modelled and wrapped around the game's many complex gun models. These things have made Counter-Strike what it is, but they have also doomed it. Because when they announced Counter-Strike 2, I was like, well, how are they going to handle the skins? They can't get rid of them, there's a whole economy around them. But how on earth are they going to port these old skins into a new game? How are they going to deal with the differences in quality between CSGO era textures and models and CS2 ones? And how are they going to PBRify all the old CSGO textures? Well, returning to the start of this video again, the answer is they don't. Old skins still use the old gun models, and any new skins that are made are using the new gun models. Is a bit more nuanced than that. Some finishes that don't require careful placement and aligning can just be ported over to the new gun models, since it's just like wrapping them in wrapping paper, and small changes to placement might not matter too much in the grand scale of things. It isn't a matter of weapon grade or value, but it will impact some types of finishes more than it does others. In particular, those with beautiful handcrafted designs with very specific placement of details. Those are pretty much doomed to remain on the old models forevermore, because new models equals new UV maps, and porting stuff across would mean that everything would end up poorly aligned. And material finishes are never going to look 100% the same under a new renderer, which is why you hear so many players complaining that their CSGO skins look different now. It is just a really, really complicated problem, and it's likely to remain like this unless Valve manually and painstakingly ports each and every skin over, doing it up and tweaking it to work with the new models and game engine and materials and stuff, which they have done on guns like the Deagle Blaze. So how do you know whether the custom skin you spent good money on is using the old or new model? Ignorance is bliss. If you have to ask, then it doesn't matter, does it? But I'm going to make it matter to you. You see this M4A1S? Remove the suppressor, and the end of it is spiky and star-shaped, edgier than a school-hosted Counter-Strike tournament. Now compare it to this skin, based on the older model. Rubbish. So there you go. New M4 model is spiky, older one isn't. Spiky, not spiky. This is what the future looks like, and it tastes all sharp and spiky. Don't eat it. But what about the poly counts? Here is the new CS2 version of the M4A4, in a beautiful new model viewer that finally lets me pan about easily. I can't tell you how fiddly the old ones are. This one lets me get really close and personal to the models, makes them look like gigantic structures looming above me. And if I click on it, it shows me that this gun has 39,558 polygons. That's a lot, over double the CSGO version, and about 40 times more than the old CS 1.6 ones did. Because bear in mind the poly count here also includes the ARM models, whereas the CS2 one does not. And for once, the M4A4 has a higher poly count than the M4A1S, which in CS2 has just 37,000 polygons. And you don't even want to know the number of polygons this simple magazine has. Oh wait, you do, don't you? Well, this thing here has 4,000 polygons. 4,000! That's more than the entire gun in Counter-Strike Source. Unoptimized? Game performance is dictated by a lot more than just raw polygon count these days. Which is why it's probably fine that the M4A4's magazine has even more polygons. Nearly 5,000 of them here, for a thing that in earlier games would probably make do with about 12. The reason for such a large poly count here is probably because it renders a bunch of bullets that are inside the magazine, just in case you were to peer down this gap here at the bullets beneath. Now these bullets do get lower poly count as they go down, and not all of the bullets in the magazine are rendered, so it's kind of optimized. But it is still a crazy and often unnecessary amount of detail on display here. But you know the most exciting thing about all this? The thing I'm really looking forward to? Guess how many polygons this dropped weapon has? Answer? Exactly the same number as when it's equipped. Thanks to Counter-Strike's obsession with custom skins and shiny finishes and the new Source 2 engine, we now get a perfect rendition of these skins no matter how or where they're viewed in the level. And I'm excited about this, because if we ever do get Left 4 Dead 3, chances are the SG model may finally no longer look so much like ass.
Nice.